Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's October the 3rd, 2004, and I'm looking forward to this night with Advocacy. We have a special guest, LaMecca. My name is Paula Armstrong. I am the founder of Advocacy. I have a 24-year-old son, Jeremy, and I have my Morgan Pop, who has multiple disabilities, but she is the joy of my life. I'm also married and live in the DMV. Let me pass the torch to Crystal.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal. I live here in Michigan. I am married with five children, and three of them have disabilities.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I am Bunny. I live in Maryland, married with three adult children, and I advocate for my special needs grandson, Grayson.
Okay, so right now we're going to turn it over to LaMecca, the founder of InspireED. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, LaMecca.
Is
Um,
Inspire Ed.
okay, Inspire Ed. Thank you for correcting me. So we're going to turn it over to LaMecca to tell us a little bit about Inspire Ed.
Certainly. So I'm LaMecca Coates, the founder of Inspire Ed. I am located in the DMV and just following suit with some of the co-hosts here. I'm also the mom to two, I guess, one preteen and a teenager. Inspire Ed is a consultancy, advocacy, as well as empowerment consultant firm that helps support families as well as educators along their career journey. So, four areas that we focus on with Inspire Ed is thought leadership, and that's working with organizations, institutions, or school districts to provide professional development opportunities for educators. The second area that we focus on is admissions to private and independent schools, helping to support families throughout the application process and making sure that families know all of the options that are available to them. The other area that we focus on is education management. Once your child is in a school, how do you actually advocate for your child when they're in that space? So anywhere from making sure that your child's educational needs are met to understanding policies and procedures at the school. How do you get the best result for your children? If there is a conflict or an issue that arises that the school contacts you about, how can you make sure that you get the outcome that you want or you deserve for your child? So I would say the main aspect of Inspire Ed is definitely helping to empower families, helping to give families the tools that they need to advocate for themselves and their children. And I would say also to help education professionals grow in their profession. I forgot to say that part. So professional growth development for people who are in the education field, helping to support them and either career growth if they're looking to get another position, if they are looking to negotiate salaries, or if they are looking to just map out their course and what they want to do next. I'll partner with those educators to help them do that.
Oh, wow. You do everything from A to Z. Now, can you tell us a little bit? I know we focus a lot on advocacy. We focus on our special needs community. I hear you say a lot about the educational field. Can you tell us specifically how you help on the special education side, or what does that look like?
Absolutely. So for families with students who have learning differences and learning needs, where Inspire Ed comes in and helps is figuring out the right educational environment for the child and for the family. And for a lot of families, that could be the public school system, because the public school system does have an array of resources available to families. Essentially, students are supposed to be placed in the least restrictive environment so that they
Mhm.
can access the curriculum and have as full of an educational experience as possible. At times, the public school may not be able to meet those student needs. So there's a couple of routes that families can go. Either go through the paces within their public school system. Sometimes families have to get what they call an advocate
Mhm.
to help do just that, advocate on their behalf. And there are many instances where the public school will then fund a private school education for that student because they are unable to provide the services that that student needs to thrive. The other route could be a parent or family pursuing an independent or private school, independent of the public schools processes. And with that, it would be similar to if I was working with a family who didn't have a neurodiverse student, really sitting down and figuring out what are the child's strengths, what their challenges are, what their interests are, what the family's looking for, and then come up with a list of schools that would best fit the needs for that child. And that would be the beginning of that process if a family was looking to go the private independent school route separate from the public school.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. I will say, and I do know, going through that process myself, it was very, very challenging. And I do know that for me, I did bump up against a lot of roadblocks. Number one, because I wasn't fully informed about, of course, the IEP process. I do know that they give us the book of the parental rights, but who's going to read that whole book?
Right.
So, or the little pamphlet. And I do know, I think the hardest part for most parents, and I can attest to that, and I've spoken to other parents that have said the same thing, it's kind of knowing where to start. You may feel like, as we as parents may feel like, okay, I don't like the school, I don't like what they're doing. But how do I start that process? What does that process look like? Because in most cases, you may have a hunch, but your hunch needs to be attached to factual information. So when you come in, if you have a parent that comes in and says, listen, I have a hunch that things is not going well. I don't see progress with my child. I really don't understand this IEP process. How do we begin to start that process?
So one of the first things that I would do with a family is to ask to see a copy of the student's IEP or 504 plan so that I can have a good understanding of what the child's needs are and what services are being provided or supposed to be provided by the school, and be able to answer any questions that a family may have. Because although it's on the paper, the family may not understand what that looks like being implemented within a classroom setting. So after looking at that, the IEP, we also want to look at the testing that was done, the psychoed testing that was done, to make sure that the recommendations that were listed in the testing has actually translated to the IEP. Because what's in the IEP is what teachers and the school is going to be held accountable for. So if there's a recommendation that is in the testing that isn't reflected in the IEP, that can be a point of conversation. And that conversation sounds like, why isn't it included in the IEP? Sometimes it's not included in the IEP because the school isn't able to provide those services. So some schools will make sure they don't include services that they can't legitimately provide. But just because a school can't provide the services, it doesn't eliminate the need for the service.
I like that. I never even thought about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one area that we would explore. The other area that we would look at is for all of the accommodations that are listed, scheduling a meeting with either the learning specialist, the counselor, whoever is in charge of that process at the school, to get an understanding of how they see these strategies being implemented. How many students are in the class? Because again, just because it's on the paper doesn't mean that they're actually doing it. So to answer your question, if a parent has a hunch that something's not right or it's not being implemented, I would start first with scheduling a meeting. I tell parents all the time, in every meeting, make sure that you come with a notepad and a pen or your device, whatever it is, that you need to take notes, so that there's an account of what was said and what the school has agreed to and how that aligns to what's in the document and what's not in the document. From there, I would say following up with unscheduled meetings, unscheduled visits to the school, pop up at the school and see what's happening. Because sometimes the school can convey one thing is happening, but that's not actually what's happening. And the parents that I've seen that have been most successful in getting the schools to either holistically implement their child's IEP or put them in a place in an environment that can meet their needs, it's because they were able to document, they were able to visit and keep a running document. And as you're documenting what you're not seeing, or what you are seeing or not seeing, then again, having that follow-up meeting to say, hey, these are my observations. This is what I'm seeing. What are we going to do moving forward? So that if you get to the point where you need to elevate your concern, you have a whole list of documentation that states what your observations were, what the responses to your observations were, if the needs were being met, if they weren't being met, and you satisfied the initial level, which is speaking to the school administrator and the learning specialist before you elevate it beyond the school building.
That's good stuff. And it's so important about documenting everything. And I did that for my grandson. I used his IEP and I compared it with the services that he was getting at the school. And I started there and I started keeping a running tab of everything. I made sure that everything was in writing so that when it was time for me to escalate it, I had everything in writing. And I think that parents miss that. They want to verbally communicate, and you can't really hold the teachers or the school officials to verbal words. But when they put that in writing, that's something that you can escalate up. And that's very important that parents understand that they have rights to take notes or even have an advocate, like you said, to come to these meetings. That's very important.
And because this can be very time consuming,
Mhm.
it doesn't always have to be the actual parent.
Right.
You can enlist your village in that. So if you have a cousin, an aunt, a grandparent, those people too, with your permission, can go to the school and make these observations as well. Of course, everyone being on the same page of what you're looking for and what you need to document, but you can also enlist the help of others, other family members, because it can be really hard to navigate when you're trying to navigate your own work schedule, as well as just life's demands, and then having to go to a school, several times each month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
that can
stuff.
be a lot. Yeah,
Mhm.
it can be. Another thing, some parents are, and I have heard this. We had Patrice and her husband on here not too long ago, and they are, they wanted to keep their son in a public school. They did everything they could, up until the point that they found that they could not do it.
Mhm.
There are some parents that really don't want the child to leave out of their school district, so, to what extent can they force the school to bring people into that school? Like you say, if they're kind of crafting that IEP up based off of what the school has to offer, but outside of what they have to offer, can you tell our parents their rights to ensure that they can bring someone in to provide whatever other services their child may need?
So there's a couple of things at play.
Okay.
One, some schools, depending on what the child's needs are not equipped to provide those needs. So some of those needs may be physical. Some of them may be, as they are looking at the needs of the entire school, sometimes there's budget constraints. So where I would challenge a parent is to ask, how long do we want to wait for the student to not get their needs met, for the school to then catch up to hiring someone to do exactly what is required for this child? So yes, parents can definitely, like I said, take notes, make observations. Depending on what the structure of the school is, make sure that you're taking it to your regional office as well as the school board and applying pressure to make sure that the child is in an environment that meets their needs. And that's where many families get to the space where the school ends up paying for the kid to go to a more private institution because they simply cannot.
Okay.
So what I would ask a parent is try to learn more about their attachment to that particular school.
Mhm.
and find out what is it that they're looking for and what is it that they need, so that I could better advise them on other options.
Mhm.
Because one of the benefits of a private or independent school is that they are independently funded. They do not have to follow the guidelines. They're not regulated by school districts or county regulations. They are funded solely by tuition, donors, and endowment. So that means that they can create a school environment where they select the curricula, school policies, as well as admission processes. Oftentimes, class sizes are smaller. Oftentimes, they have the budget to make sure that whatever services are needed, that the personnel are in place to make sure that the needs are met, met for those students. And it is a wide range of what's available, anywhere from traditional approaches to progressive to alternative to specifically schools that cater to students with learning differences. And
Mhm.
those schools that cater to students with learning differences run the spectrum as well. It is anywhere from a student who has ADHD and executive functioning challenges. Their supports are going to look different from a student who has autism, and
Mhm.
the support structures that they need there. So sometimes families will find greater support measures in these independent spaces because there is more flexibility, and it isn't the many layers of governance that
Mhm.
that can exist in a public school system.
Now, are the independent schools the same as the non-public schools? Can you clarify that?
Certainly. So a non-public school, when you say non-public school, are you thinking of charter schools, or can you be more specific?
Um, well, I will say that my daughter goes to Kennedy Krieger. I know that's a not, they classify that as a non-public school. Is that the same as an independent school? Because I asked that because they are still governed by some of the rules and regulations that line up with the public school. Because at her IEP meeting, you have someone from the public school coming to that IEP meeting to ensure that Kennedy Krieger stays on point.
Got it.
Yeah. So I don't, when you say, I hear you saying as far as like them not having some of the independent schools, can you kind of give us some like some idea of some of the independent school versus the non-public? Because I think that they're going to function differently. Because I do think that non-public schools, they do still have to line up with some of the federal regulations.
So an independent school is solely governed independently. So
Okay.
they do have a school board, but they get a chance to decide what their curriculum is. They get to decide what their educational philosophy is so that they can tailor their program to their student body.
Okay. So give me an example of one of those schools in this area, I guess. I want to.
Certainly. So, wow. So in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, we have a lot
Okay. Yeah,
of
I guess I didn't know how many we
Yeah, that's
had.
what I was about to ask. Like, LaMecca, you must be familiar with a
Yeah.
lot of schools in the area, because when you said you work with families, with kids with different learning differences or learning disabilities, and when you're reading their stuff, when you're reading their documents or anything, or you just listening to the parents and you're taking in, you're formulating in your mind. Mm, I know these schools might be better fits for this student. So
Exactly.
I was wondering, like, your knowledge of the schools, like when Paula just asked, like, can you give us a school in the area? Like, I was like, LaMecca you must have a really good knowledge of what's in the area
And their
provided so that you
curriculum.
can help direct
Mm-hmm.
families and help them know. That's what I was
Mm-hmm.
wanting
Because you got to be familiar with their curriculum. And that's what I was kind of saying, Crystal. Like, yeah, you can almost say, I think they will line up with this school.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah.
So I'm not endorsing any of these schools. I'm just running off a list that comes off the top of my head. So let's say in Alexandria, you have Alexandria Country Day School, you have Brown Academy, You have Burgundy Farm Country Day School. In Maryland, was that Temple Hills? You have Maryland International Day School. You have Sidwell in DC, which most people are familiar with
I've heard of
because
that.
that's where the Obama girls
Okay.
went. Some people may be familiar with St. Andrews because that's where Trump's son Barron went for
Okay.
a couple of years. There's also the Siena School, which is, I believe, in Potomac, Maryland. They
Okay.
focus on students that have learning differences. You have the lab school that is also in DC that focuses on students with learning differences. You have field school that's in up
Wow.
there by American University. You have Edmund Burke. Like there is a wide range of schools that we
Wow.
have in the area. And that's where I was saying I wouldn't go too much into it before we went live. That's where a lot of my passion came from with the independent school admissions, is because I learned that a lot of families don't even know that it exists. They don't know that
Mhm.
independent schools are an option. Most families are very familiar with their public school option. They may be familiar with charter school options, or then you have those options that are out of boundary that you can apply, whether it's through a lottery or some type of system, if you want your child to go to a school that's out of their local boundary. But
Mhm.
and if parents know about private schools, you mostly know about Catholic schools, parochial
Yeah.
schools.
Mhm.
Families are very familiar with that. But what are considered independent schools are across the United States. So in most states, there is an independent school. I grew up in New York City, where some of the most prominent independent schools exist, and I had no idea. I had no
Wow.
idea. It was after
Wow.
I became an educator and started interacting with people in different spaces that I learned more about independent schools, and again developed just a passion of educating families on their existence and the process. And then for other families, they may know that independent schools exist, but are very intimidated and overwhelmed by the process. So
Mhm.
if
Yes.
they look into it and they recognize the multiple steps that it requires to even apply, a lot of times that's a deterrent for families, and they just decide that they don't know enough about it. There's many things in life we just don't know enough about it. I think about older generations with technology. It's not that it isn't good, it's just it hurts your head. You're just like, it's
Mhm.
too much. I can't.
Yes.
So part of my job with Inspire Ed is to simplify the process for families, to help support them step by step through the process so that it is a viable option for families and helping them find the right fit for their child.
Now, LaMecca, I do have a question because I just went through the process of getting Grayson placed in what they consider as non-public placement into a private school, but it's considered non-public placement. I never heard about independent schools. They give
Mm-mm.
you a list of the schools that you
Mhm.
can select, but there were no mention of
Independent.
independent schools. You just get this
Mm-mm.
list of, for my area, it was a list for DC and a list for Maryland. Um, and they asked for the top three. What are your top three? So he did get in the top one that I really wanted, but I did not hear anything about independent schools. And the process is extremely intimidating because I kind of, just went on the fly and did all of this stuff to try to advocate for Grayson. But yeah, I've never heard of independence.
Never.
In Maryland, what they call it, well, not just in Maryland, but they just call it non-public placement, which is
Mhm.
they're going to place your child in a public school and Maryland is going to pay the tuition.
Well, LaMecca, do you think that maybe school districts, when they're recommending like a non-public school placement, do you think they're steering parents away from the independent school, like
Mhm.
to not put that out there? Because then the more parents learn, the more parents know,
The more
they're going to
power they
share
have.
that with another parent. And
Mhm.
people are going to be
Advocates say
like,
it's
well, I have
power.
right.
Knowledge is
People are going to
power.
say, I didn't know I had this option. And
Yeah.
also, like, have you worked with families that were coming from a public school setting and it just wasn't working for their kid? Maybe it was even like the services provided were not being provided. Like you said, sometimes a school just may not have what that child needs. And
Mhm.
so, is did you ever run into uh, cases where it's just not an option, but you might have presented it to a family and it may have worked out better than what the district was probably presenting to a family?
So I would say I have limited knowledge about the schools that a district may have, because
Mhm.
what I, if I had to take a guess, is that they have a partnership with these
That's what I think.
schools,
Mhm.
and there is an agreement in terms of how much is it going to cost per student
Mhm.
in terms of the money that's coming from the district, almost similar to a charter school, how much money gets reallocated for the cost of educating that child to that institution. So I'm thinking that could be based on partnerships versus an intentional deterrent from
Mhm.
an independent school. But again,
Okay.
I'm not too sure about that. To answer your question about have I worked with the family where public school was not working and we explored other options, absolutely.
Mhm.
And part of the family's interest and goal was to make sure that their children could be in an environment that could meet their learning needs,
Mhm.
specific to what their testing outlined. And again, in terms of independent schools, it's going to run the gamut on what that school specializes in or has the capacity to focus on. We look at educational approaches and philosophies. How is the lessons being taught in each of these spaces, and how does that align with that child's learning needs and learning style?
Now, when I hear you talk about the independent schools, I know I also hear you talk about the educational differences. Are there any independent schools that are geared towards special needs individuals? Because I know we do have some. I think it's a difference in my mind, and maybe I'm just again. I'm learning just like everybody else. But is there, when you talk about educational differences, how is that different from like someone that is autistic nonverbal? Do we have independent schools that can be an option for those parents?
So for autistic nonverbal, I would have
Hmm.
to circle back to you on that.
Hmm.
But for students with special needs, I mentioned the Siena School, the McLean School. There is Commonwealth Academy that works with students with special needs, as well as the Lab School works with students with learning differences.
Can you tell us what some of those learning differences are that you know about that those schools will accommodate?
Anywhere from dyslexia
Hmm.
to ADHD,
Hmm.
executive functioning.
Hmm.
I don't want to leave any of them out. Um,
And
those are
sometimes we do know if a child has been diagnosed with all of those disorders, it becomes one big disorder that can definitely affect them from an educational standpoint.
yeah.
Yeah.
You also have the Lender Academy. So, what I would do for a family who was looking specifically for a program for a student who was autistic nonverbal, then I would then meet with that family. Obviously, that would be one main need, and we would explore the schools that would be a good fit for that learner.
So I think at
Yeah.
that point too, when a parent is like, feeling like that the public school is not educating them. So at that point, it sounds like it's great to make an appointment with you, and even for you to, and I'm not sure if you do this, do you attend some of the IEP meetings to kind of sit in and hear what some of the concerns are with the parent, and then from there you meet with the parent and then you guys come up with a game plan?
All of the work that I do with clients are personalized.
Okay.
So if that is the need of the family and the request of the family, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
So depending on what that family needs. In some instances, we may be able to start with looking at the learning profile, the IEP, and the testing to see if there's any inconsistencies there. However, as you mentioned, there's also the option to go to the school, hear what the school personnel are saying, sharing, and then strategize from there.
This is great.
It is.
Um,
It's this is a lot of good
it's an eye
information.
opener because, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, Morgan is 20, of course, but I think back to when I was having issues with the school and just knowing, I guess for me, it's like knowing is half the battle. Knowledge is
Mhm.
power, whichever way you want to say it. And I think just knowing that the school is giving you these schools to look at, like you say, Bunny, but just saying, well, wait a minute, I have some other options that I may want to bring to the table, and I may want to consider these. It's like, for real, the school somewhat is still kind of over, like they're kind of really keeping you in a box,
They
and you're,
still want some control.
yeah, it's still a
Mhm.
level of control to me. It is.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
think I was
know.
just about to ask that. Like, LaMecca, have you worked with a family that maybe was placed in an independent school from a public school? Like, I wondered, would a public school support that if an independent school was found to be able to meet the need of the student? Would a public school support that, or would that family
Mhm.
pretty much have to just consider that this is not an option, public school? If this is the better option, they need to probably come to terms with what will serve their kid in the best way. Like,
Mhm.
have you had to navigate that with any families?
So, with a public school supporting a student at an independent school, because they are two separate entities, that support looks like completing recommendations. That support looks like making sure that that child has a full and complete file that can then be transferred over to the independent school so that that school knows how to meet the student's needs. So any conversations that need to occur between both institutions definitely can happen and will happen, whether verbally or in writing. But is there an ongoing relationship or partnership between the two
Yeah.
institutions? No.
Okay. I think that needed to be stated as well so people have a clear understanding about the differences of the relationship between a public school and independent schools.
Because the
But getting that
non-public
help
seems
is
like
so
it meets up in
important.
the middle.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
the
help is so
non-public.
important.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
is, because I think
Mhm.
at some point, again, learning and knowing our rights, is it something that the parent can say, well, I've done my own research.
Right.
And even though the schools that you've given me, I don't feel like they would truly meet the needs of my child. Because I'm sure with you, Bunny, when you did the research, I know you were telling us, like, okay, I want them here for this reason, but I didn't like this, but I didn't like this. But it's almost like you feel like you have to pick one of those schools. I would love to know, is it an option for we as parents to bring our recommendation to the table?
I would say for families within Prince George's County, I have known families to bring specifically their schools that they founded to say this school would best meet my child's needs, and
Okay.
the school district paying for that alternative school environment.
I know I had to do that. The school that Grayson is at now, it was not on the list. And one
Wow.
school they insisted to put on the list, I just did not want that school. And their reasoning was, oh, it's PG County. And I did not want to be. My thing is, I'm trying to forward think for Grayson's education and not just for him being in second grade. I wanted to think second grade and beyond, what would be best for him to support his emotional needs, his social needs, everything, sensory needs, all of that. And I had to make a decision on do I allow the county to pretty much pressure me in, oh, pick this school, it's best, we want you to consider this school because it's PG County. And I wanted to do my own research. So the school that he's at was not on the list.
Mm.
When I brought it to the table, it's like, oh, you'll never get in there. It's a long waiting list. And I said, but I still want to consider that school. And I talked to a few educators, and it was like, oh yeah, that's the better school of these ones that they are suggesting. So it's a slim chance that he won't get in that school. So yeah, they do come to the table with their schools that they have these partnerships with and relationships with, and this is what they present to you. But if parents aren't educated enough to, and you got to have some boldness too to speak out in these
Mhm.
settings,
Mhm.
if you don't know that you can offer another suggestion, then you'll just take what they give you, and that particular school may still not be able to meet your kids needs. And I've really, Grayson had behavior needs, emotional, he had a lot of needs that needed to be met. And I felt that the schools that was on the list, it wasn't going to meet. And Kennedy Krieger was on there, but again, that's Baltimore. I'm like, he'll be on the bus for a long time. He's
Mhm.
only 7, so we considered that as well. But they were full. But yeah, it parents, they really need to spend some time and educating themselves on this whole process, and speaking to people like you, LaMecca, to figure out,
Mhm.
what are my options, what can I say, and getting some guidance to move forward. I did it all afraid. I came to
Mhm.
the team here, and I used Google, and I pretty much advocated for Grayson, all while being afraid, sitting at these tables, sitting in the midst of all of these experts in the special education field. And here I am, just a grandma coming in. Um, but with the help of this team and God,
Mhm.
Grayson was moved to non-public placement, and he's at a school, and he's thriving. So I'm satisfied. So parents need to know, stand for your child and educate for them, advocate for them, and just don't do it just for today. Do it for all the grades through walking across that stage.
And not just for your neurotypical, and I think sometimes and I will say, in some ways I did tell people, I said I felt like Morgan is one of a kind, which she is, but
Mm-hmm.
I felt like nobody could meet her needs. I really did. I mean, from the babysitters to the schools to the environments, the restaurants, to like most of her needs. Most of our kids have multiple needs, and I think that given all of the choices, and with you, LaMecca, you are providing information about independent schools. I have never heard of independent schools.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. I think again, that's something that we even need to have on the table as an option. Parents, there are independent schools out there.
Yeah.
So don't
Mhm.
just take what the school gives you. Your kids are supposed to be educated. And I think with the child no left, the law, no child left behind.
Every child is entitled to a free and an appropriate education.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
If the school cannot provide that, then it is incumbent upon the school to fund an option that works for that learner.
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
think that's something that we all need to hear. And I know for most of the parents, after I got Morgan out, most of the parents that I talked to, they said the same thing, like, I just don't feel like dealing with it. It's a lot to go through. So that's where you come in, LaMecca. And I'm not going to lie, I went all the way to Baltimore. I searched and I hunted
Yeah.
for someone to help me. And I think part of it is number one, we already have I know for me, I had my son, I had my daughter, I had work. You have so much on your plate as a parent already, doctor's appointments. So when you think about this extra layer, a lot of times it's not that parents don't want to do it, it's just a lot
It's
on
another
it.
full-time job.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
but it's
is.
worth it. In the end, the end goal is always worth it, because I stayed up. It would be in the wee hours of the morning trying to learn, what is the Disability Act? What does that mean? What does it mean when the school tell you, oh, we're short staffed, but it's okay. We're going to take care of him. We hear that all the time. It's short staffed. We can't get good teachers in. Grayson's previous school was giving approval at the county level to hire him a one-on-one to be with him in school until we can get him placed someone else. It took months before they even was able to hire a
Yeah.
one-on-one for him. But I did not let that sit. I stayed in the emails. I constantly emailed, hey, what's going on? What's the status of his one-on-one? He was given approval for this months ago. Why can't you find somebody? And I think parents just really need to know that we have rights as parents of our kiddos with, I like that, learning difficulties, or learning differences.
Yeah.
I like that, because it's not that our students can't learn, it's that
Absolutely.
they learn different, and it's okay. And teachers need to understand that. I've got a parent now dealing with a kiddo with in the school, and the teacher really is not understanding how to really teach that child. And that's what's unfortunate, because the child will sit in a class for the whole year and regress and not learn. And the teacher is frustrated in that environment. So we as parents, we have rights, but we've got to use our words the correct way, and we got to speak the right language. And I learned that. I learned
Mhm.
that I needed to let them know Grayson had a learning disability. He has autism. I had to let them know he's autistic and nonverbal, and his brain does not function the way that other kids. We need to teach Grayson at his level. I just changed the way I spoke to those teachers, the principal, the district, the county. It didn't matter. I'm going to advocate for him at the doctor's office. Like you said, Paula, everywhere we go,
Mhm.
we've got to advocate for these students. So um, it is great that you offering this help, LaMecca, because it's like you said, it's a part-time job. It really is.
It
It
is.
is.
It's a
It
part.
is. Well, LaMecca, I want to ask, like, we gave the example and talking, like, what if a family came to you and they had a student that is autistic and nonverbal? To me, that could still look so different,
Mhm.
because just because they are on the spectrum and they're nonverbal does not mean they're not intelligent,
Right.
does not mean they don't know how to communicate in other ways and means. And so I guess you would, what are something, can you help a family that's listening and to kind of understand what is it about? Because some people might just say, I'm not sure I can help that kid because they didn't hear the full report or story or
Right.
what's going on. So, what is it that you would really want to know more about this kid before you give like your recommendation? And then I'm assuming, because I know you shared a lot of schools, the independent schools in the areas, and some that I feel like you are way knowledgeable of, like, your
Mhm.
wheels probably turn as you hear and work with families of which schools, which placements will you be like, I could see this kid here or that. Like,
Mhm.
how does that look? Like, I would like to know that, because sometimes just certain diagnoses does not really count out certain students. Just like we might say a kid might have dyslexia, that doesn't count them out from being able to um, have other placement than just
Mhm.
uh, public school. So I was just wanting to know, like, what are some of the things you're looking for when you're with families to get to know that student before you come up with some recommendations of certain placements, especially in the independent schools.
So certainly. So I would say speaking with that family to learn what their experience has been with their child in various learning environments, any
Mhm.
reports that have been shared with the school, obviously their experiences with the school. A lot of times parents know their children differently than teachers or people outside of the home. So based on the parent's observation, what is the parent seeing that? Because if a parent is talking to me, then they are lacking something a lot of times in their current environment. So what is it that that family is looking for that they aren't getting? One of the great parts about independent schools, as part of the application process, is a school tour and a visit. So that is a space where before we narrow down a list, the list is pretty broad.
Okay.
And I help to prep families before they go on a school tour on what to look for, the types of questions to ask,
That's good.
so that they have an idea or what on whether or not this would even be a space where they could see their child going. And
Yes.
it's no harm, no foul. You go, you're not committed to applying. You really are going to learn about the school. Depending on the timeline that I have with the family, independent school application processes happen mostly in the fall. It begins in the fall of the preceding year. So, for example, if you have a child that's going into fourth grade, or you want them to go to the school in fourth grade, you would apply during the third grade year. So
Okay.
at the beginning of their third grade year in the fall, that's when you would start the process. Most applications are due in January, and then you get acceptance in March. So that's a typical cycle for most independent schools. So for a family that has a long runway and can reach out to me early, I recommend that families go and visit in the springtime. And the reason that I ask them to go in the springtime is because typically you'll get a one-on-one visit or tour. So you can ask questions specific about your child's needs, and it's more one-on-one versus a lot of the times in the fall, it will be a group tour. So it's still a good way for you to learn about the school, but when you can do it ahead of time in the spring, it isn't the same pressure. It isn't the normal cycle. And that means come August, we can then narrow down to a list of schools that you actually liked, that you actually felt would be a good match for your kid. Again, we could start in August and that works as well. But when we talk about the space where parents feel overwhelmed, it can feel very overwhelming to visit schools, figure out if you like them. There's an application. Sometimes there is an essay, an interview, a shadow visit. Like there are multiple layers to applying to an independent school.
Wow.
So the more time that we have to map it out, particularly for a family that feels overwhelmed or is unfamiliar with the process, the better it may feel for that parent. But that's also why I am there to help smooth that process along the way. So, for example, I got a text yesterday, maybe at 11 o'clock
PM.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We gonna text whenever we want. Whenever we need help, we texting.
Yeah, I got a text that essentially said, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I just finished this aspect of the application. I am feeling really overwhelmed. So part of my job too is encouraging and to be the cheerleader for families. Sometimes families need to
Social
hear,
workers, therapists, all of that.
Wow.
families need to hear, you are doing a great job. You are exactly where you need to be. That is an example of a family that I started working with in the spring. So having to remind this mom who is a single parent, who's trying to navigate this process, to really tell her, we just entered October. You are ahead of the curve. You are doing an amazing job. Give yourself a pat on the back. I will get on that tomorrow and give you feedback, and we'll go from there. So that's part of the process as well in supporting families.
And that's definitely important because
Yeah.
we need that push to keep going, because we get to the halfway and it's like we look back and see how far we've come, but then we still look ahead to see how far we still got to go. So it can get discouraging. So Awesome. Good job. Look, good job, LaMecca. Good job.
I do that with
Yes.
Morgan. Now, can
Yes.
I ask too? The only people that come to you are people that want to leave the public school because they feel as though their children do not get the services they need, or is it just parents that says, I just want my child at an independent school? That's one question. And then part B is, I know we never talk about costs, but is there funding? Because I know that's some of the things that our community runs from is cost. Do they have
Yes.
scholarships? How does that look as far as that payment?
So I work with families in both categories. Families who are looking for a different space and different environment, as well as families who are partially informed and know that they want to apply their kids to an independent school. I will say for me personally, I, for the most part, I have neurotypical children. One does have what would be the equivalent of a 504 plan. But for me, I wanted an environment that aligned with my educational philosophy. So it wasn't that I didn't think they would learn how to multiply and read or write. I was looking for an environment that was going to respect them as a human being and as a person, even as a 4-year-old. A place that was going to encourage them to advocate for themselves, encourage them to speak up for themselves. And in essence, they call those more progressive environments. So they're in schools where they call their teachers by first names. That was important to me, not the first name piece, but it was important to me that they were seen as a whole being and that they were in an environment that not only focused on their educational attainment, but also their social emotional development.
Okay.
So for me, I went more of the progressive route with independent schools. Again, independent schools, you can get a very traditional environment that's very similar to what most of us had in schooling. So again, it could be that a family has tried a particular school, a public school, and it hasn't worked for them. And they're coming to me to figure out what the other options are. Or maybe a family like me who know specifically or having a better idea of what they're looking for, and they're then looking to partner with InspireED to get a tailored list of schools that would meet the needs that they're looking for in terms of cost. So yes, that is can be a very big deterrent.
Mm-hmm.
Some independent schools cost what
College.
college education cost.
Mhm.
So a lot of times families will research and look at the school and it's like, oh, this is a great school, lovely option, and then get to the cost page and exit out the window.
Right.
If not jump.
Yes. So again, it can be a big deterrent. However, schools do provide financial support. Each school, it may look a little different. Some schools will do need-based aid only. Other schools will have scholarships in addition to need based. And I think our idea of what need based is very limited. A lot of times for, let's say, public programs, need based is a salary below the poverty line. However, with independent schools, that is not the case. You have families who make six figures, who receive support, financial support from the schools. So part of the support that I provide for families is helping them navigate through that financial aspect of the application, whether it's a financial aid application or scholarship, and helping them to just navigate that process. Again, the size of the award is going to be contingent upon multiple factors. You know, a family's assets, expenses, disposable income, salaries, whether or not you're married or single, you know, all of that goes into what the offer is for a family. However, a family can decide after they receive their financial award if they want to accept the acceptance or not.
Okay.
So as long as the family is okay with going through the application process, knowing that there aren't any financial guarantees, they still have the option to say yay or nay.
Mhm.
The other thing that families don't realize is if a family is given a financial award that does not meet their needs, they can appeal that. They can submit an appeal letter to the institution and make their case as to why that doesn't meet their needs. And they can be as specific to say what exactly it is, the specific number that they need. Some families, as we speak in the space of advocating, some families shy away from that because they think that if they do that, that somehow in our minds we think, well, they're going to take the offer back. They will
Mhm.
Mm.
not rescind an offer because a
Mhm.
family appealed a financial decision. One or three things are going to happen. They're going to say, okay, great, we can give you what you're asking for. They're going to say, no, we've maxed out our budget and this is the best we can do. Or they're going to meet you somewhere in the middle and say, hey, this is what we can do. Or maybe, let's say if a student needs bus services, or part of the school's requirements is that a student has a laptop, they may not be able to increase the financial award, but they may be able to provide bus services
Mhm.
free of charge to the family, or provide a laptop, or some of those other necessities that's going to
Mm.
support the student in that learning environment. So I always tell families, don't shy away from
Mhm.
the price tag, because again, within that institution, you're going to have families that pay the full price tag, but then
Mhm.
you're going to have families that have payments that are within their budget that they can manage.
And then you got all that donor money. Like, send me some of that donor money.
I was going to say that's the other thing in terms of like
Yep, the
research, right?
donors.
I don't. I create a space where families can share as much about their financial situation as they want or not. That doesn't preclude me from helping. Um, but some schools have larger budgets than others, so it is helpful. Again, I don't need to know someone's salary, but looking
Mhm.
at the price tag of a school, it's important to know, based on this price tag, would you need 10% support or would you need 90% 90%
Mhm.
support? And depending on the institution and how much they award per year in financial aid can give a gauge for some families whether or not this would be a good fit for them financially. So again, when
Mhm.
Mhm.
we're talking about fit, we're talking about so many different things.
Yes.
We are talking
Yeah.
about learning styles and learning differences.
Yeah.
We are talking about things that parents minimize. Like, does your kid need transportation to and from school? Do
Mhm.
you need to apply to a school that has transportation? Because some schools do not. Is it helpful for your child to attend a school that serves lunch? Or are you okay with packing lunch? Do you have a sports kid? Do you have an arts kid? Are you looking for all boys, all girls? Like, there's so many factors to consider. And that's
Mhm.
where that initial meeting with the family is really important for me to learn all of that, the financial piece included, so that we can then come up with a list that fits the family holistically, not
Mhm.
Okay.
just the educational need for the kid, but what is the need for the family holistically.
I
That
like
is really good. And to know that you are right there to guide them through the process, that helps out a lot. And when you said that there are schools that go by first name only, Grayson School is first name. And I was taken back when I walked in the building. They was like, hello, Sarita. I was like, excuse me. I was like, my first name is Mrs. Smith. So I had to get used to that. I felt like really out of place with these first names. I mean, everybody is first names.
Right.
So I'm used to it now. And it's like, hey, hey Susan, hey Amy. You know, it's really weird to call them, and that's not their names, but it's just
Right.
really weird to call
Mhm.
them by first names. But yeah,
All
it's a
right.
great for family
Depending on
time.
how you raise your child, then it is the question of, well, when you're not in school, is this person named Mary or is she Miss Smith?
Right. Right.
Because and helping your child navigate between those, two spaces, or
Mm-hmm.
even being self-conscious to say, well, when my kid called you Mary, they weren't being disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more of what's the norm for them in their day to
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we thank you, LaMecca. We really thank you for joining us.
Yes.
This
Yes,
has
this
been
was
really
such
good.
great information. And before we go, can you put your contact information into the poster comment, because we definitely want to have it where anybody that needs your services can reach out to you. Again, I think this was great information. I
Mhm.
appreciate you coming on, and those are my closing remarks. Crystal, Bunny, can y'all give any closing remarks, and then we'll let LaMecca close us out.
LaMecca gave great insight for families to broaden their horizons of when it comes to their child's education
Mhm,
and how they don't have to be limited and
mhm,
the options out there with public schools, non-public schools, independent schools, and I think that I've got from it that she's helping us understand, even though it may look a bit tedious, take that leap of faith. And she is someone that can help you with that process. So I do hope that families really, really explore their options.
mhm.
Absolutely. It's been awesome chatting with you tonight, LaMecca. I learned a lot, especially about independent schools.
Mhm.
I wish that I would have known about that because I'm sure it would have been on my list of, no, I
Yeah.
want to try that school. So thank you so much for coming on, sharing something that we did not know. And I really hope that this was helpful to our parents out there, that they can reach out to you and get started. And to know that they do not have to settle for keeping their student in a school, in a space that is not conducive to their learning abilities. So thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for allowing me to join the conversation tonight. I really enjoyed speaking with all of you. I really enjoyed your questions.
Mhm.
I would say, as a takeaway for anyone who's viewing and for all of you wonderful ladies, continue to advocate for your children. Your
Mhm.
children need your voice. And as
Mhm.
you said, Bunny, even if you're doing it scared, continue to do it. Seek out the resources that you have around you, whether those are co-hosts, or there are other services like InspireED that can help and support you through the process. But whatever you do, don't stop advocating for your child so that they can have the best outcome possible.
All
Absolutely.
right. Well, thank you again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Send your questions in. A lot of the times we get views behind and people are asking questions. So, guys, send your questions in. We'll definitely link you up with LaMecca. And we appreciate everybody joining us. We have another show on next Thursday. So please come and join us. Again, any subjects that you would like to see, throw them in the comments section. Knowledge is, yes, knowledge is power. You see, we didn't coordinate this, guys. It just
Not at
worked out
all.
like this. But it just shows that knowledge is power. And again, we
Yes.
Absolutely.
appreciate you. Everybody have a great weekend and enjoyed you tonight. And again, come back and enjoy us next Thursday. Okay. All
Thank
right,
you.
everybody. Have a
Bye.
good one.